As artificial intelligence rapidly reshapes the workplace, it's natural to wonder, will AI revolutionize your job for the better or replace it entirely? Should we fear AI or embrace it? In today's episode, we explore whether AI can liberate us from tedious tasks, empowering us to focus on what truly matters. Our guest this week, Dan Turchin, believes in the potential of AI to transform work in ways that uplift rather than diminish. Join us as we dive into his optimistic vision for a future where AI complements human skills and amplifies our capabilities.
We have been on this steady path toward building or instilling fear in us that superhuman AI is about to take the form of humanoid robots, and we're right on the cusp of dystopian science fiction.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's the case. I think if instead we shifted the paradigm, kind of the framework, the mental model that we use, to thinking about AI more like the hand loom weavers thought about a steam powered loom, or
Right.
how the horse and buggy drivers thought about the gas engine.
Right.
That's a better way to think about the partnership that's going to change the world.
And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Your engagement is what makes future podcast episodes possible. And we have a number of exciting episodes coming up that tackle topics such as responsible AI and consciousness.
This is the OpenAI Changes Everything podcast with your host, Stephen Walther, where we explore how OpenAI is transforming the future of humanity.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have Dan Turchin with us today. And let me start by giving a brief bio. Dan has spent his career at the intersection of AI and work, driven by a passion to improve the way people engage with their jobs. As the co-founder and CEO of PeopleRain, he leads the world's leading platform in employee service automation, transforming the IT and HR landscape for some of the largest global organizations. In addition to his role at PeopleRain, Dan is an active angel investor and advisor, helping to shape the future of innovative AI startups. He also hosts the very popular weekly podcast, AI and the Future of Work, which boasts over 300 episodes. That's amazing. And a dedicated community of more than 1 million listeners. That's also incredible. Hey, Dan, I just want to say thank you for joining us today.
Stephen, it's my pleasure. It's fun to be on the other side of the microphone.
Yeah, I would imagine after all 300 episodes. And I should, I just want to start by saying podcast is great. I've enjoyed so many of the episodes. I took some time, as I normally do. I spent some time, researching, my guests beforehand. Deloitte interview was awesome. Lots of great interviews on the podcast. So definitely suggest that people sign up for that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the upcoming shows too. And 300 episodes, it blows my mind. I mean, I think this is like episode 22 for me. So I'm like, barely scratching at that surface. But
you're getting there. And I'm a fan of your podcast. I enjoyed learning about how LLMs are deconfabulators.
Oh, great. Awesome.
With Kurt Cagle.
Nice.
So that was a fun one, as have all of the ones that I've listened. So
nice.
Congrats on your journey.
Oh, thank you. Well, I want to dive right in because I am super interested in AI and the future of work. And I know you've had a lot of experience thinking about this. And so I want to start by, there's lots of things going on right now in the AI world. But I wanted to start with your company, PeopleRain. And can you give us some context? What is PeopleRain? What do you guys do? What's your mission?
Yeah, PeopleRain is the culmination of almost a 3-decade journey for me and a lot of my team. We've been together through multiple companies. PeopleRain is the 7th company in this space, applying AI and machine learning to delivering better work experiences. And things have changed. Back when we first got our start, we had a similar vision, but we didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the algorithms. We didn't have the compute, the storage. And so what was a vision when we started, my first company was called Aeroprize back in the 90s, we didn't have even a thing called AI. We called them recommender systems.
Yeah.
And the original vision kind of came out of a, uh, a rough experience I had. My first job out of college was as an industrial engineer at the Walt Disney Company. And I loved my job so much, but like a day a week, I felt like was wasted of my time. And there was kind of just an infinite, passion I had for the work that I loved doing. And I spent a lot of my time doing compliance work and filling out forms. There were paper forms back then. And it occurred to me that if the friction that I encountered as an engineer at Disney was similar to what other employees experienced, then gosh, the impact on employee engagement and morale
Yeah.
and GDP
Right.
must be enormous. And so what if you could extract all the friction away from work? And the thesis was always, if you were able to do that, then what would remain is the work that people love. And so can I say my why? Like the reason I believe I was put on this planet is to help 1 billion employees do the best work of their lives.
See,
And our
I
mission,
love that vision. I love the idea. I mean, I've loved so many jobs I have, but there's always been this sort of soul deadening, kind of part of that, of doing a job where you wish it would go away. So I'm assuming that People Rain allows you to automate some of that sort of not so exciting parts of it. You mentioned compliance. Are there like what are kind of the areas? What does People Rain allow you to do?
yeah. Um, the things that you can think about people in automating are all the things that when you get up in the morning and
Yeah.
you look at your calendar, they make you grumpy. Like, oh man, I got to do that.
Right.
Really? Again?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all those things that sap your energy are
Right.
preventing you from doing the things that give you energy.
Right.
So those things tend to be, I need to add a dependent to my benefits.
Yeah.
My laptop's running slow. I need help clearing the cache, or, I need to upgrade my cell plan because I'm traveling internationally, or,
Right.
what's our leave policy? Because I'm not sure how much PTO I have left. And
Right.
all these things generate either insanely, like a ticket or a case, and it's super dehumanizing.
Yeah.
Like we spend, the rest of the day either offline or, can't work. We're kind of grumpy because nobody wants to be unproductive.
Right.
And meanwhile, on the other side, like there's some poor human that's responsible for like processing the ticket and triaging it. And like, you kind of feel like you're the robot because you're waiting for, the number, you're put in a queue, given like an ID, like you're branded on the arm with like your ticket number.
Right.
So it's like the worst possible way to deliver experience to deliver service that could be delightful if it were just automated like it should be.
Yeah.
And so what PeopleRain does is extracts all those tasks that create friction between the employee and the employer. And we go to market in the form of this, what we call the AI system of intelligence, 5 AI first applications that span the life cycle of the employee service request and get the employee back 4 to 6 hours of productive time per week.
Wow. And that is that data backed, that 4 to 6 hours?
Ironclad.
That's
customer
awesome.
reported.
Wow. That's great. Yeah, I'd love 4 to 6 hours back a week. Okay, that's great. I guess, well, so let me dive in right into the controversial questions. So one of the things I'm struggling with AI is there seems to be two messages going on around it right now. I love this vision that you're talking about AI removing all the boring stuff, all the soul deadening stuff, all the stuff you look on your calendar you don't want to do during the week. But I'm also concerned that it also seems to start encroaching on some of the stuff that we might also want to do. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen the announcement from, Salesforce and Microsoft. They have their AI agents, their virtual employees. They're, kind of moving into like, or Devon, the virtual, full computer engineer that you can now pay for, and it's supposed to not only write code, it does all the adjacent things like sets up the compilers and does all the dependencies and all that stuff. So I guess one of the things I'm struggling with is I love this idea of moving into a new world where, AI does all the boring stuff, But I know that a lot of people have fears right now that it will also like just replace some of the interesting stuff that they do want to do during the day. And I guess I'm curious what your take is on that.
Strong opinions on that one, Stephen. Uh, AI is really optimized for doing tasks, not jobs, but tasks that are one of the three Ds: dull,
uh,
dirty, or dangerous.
okay.
And oftentimes tasks that fit that category, I would argue, shouldn't be done by humans.
Yeah.
So I want no human ever to have to be dispatched for months on end on an oil rig,
Yeah.
or for the human to go out into a minefield
Yeah.
and tell us where the mines are, the live mines, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Diffusing bombs. Not a good career move.
not a
Yeah.
good task for a human.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Likewise, the poor soul who's in a factory, screwing caps on tubes of toothpaste
Yeah.
all day long. You know what? I'm not sure that was that person's calling in life. And when I think about all of the higher skill, more fulfilling jobs that are
Yeah.
created when automation is introduced to automate any task involving the 3Ds, that's when I get really excited about the future of work. And I encourage employees who naturally have this anxiety to ask this question of themselves. Am I doing the best work of my life?
Yeah.
And if, let's say, conservatively, I get back a half a day to a day of my life, what would I do differently? And know that, according to the World Economic Forum, while AI in the next 3 years is likely to eliminate 85 million jobs, it's likely to create 97 million new ones. So think about it as an opportunity to discover why you were put on this planet.
So I guess let me try to echo back. I think what I'm hearing you say. I think what I'm hearing you say is if your job is the type of job that could be eliminated by AI, maybe you should reconsider whether or not you're actually getting a lot of the out of the job right now, and maybe there's a better something you'd find more meaningful if you had switched talents. Like if you're, I don't know, I guess it's not called Active Directory anymore, but what if you were like a Active Directory expert in the past, and now AI can automate a lot of that stuff? That could be all to the good because it can unleash maybe something that's more you find more creative or meaningful, where you're not like mastering. I don't know what's the other one like SharePoint or something. And you're not a SharePoint administrator anymore. That's something that you shouldn't have really aspired to in the first place. Or maybe you would find that you have a richer life if you took on more of a sort of a leadership position in other areas. Am I capturing the way you're thinking about this?
Another way I say it is anything that can be predicted is better left to machines,
Yeah.
but anything that requires rational judgment or critical thinking or empathy
Yeah.
is and always will be better left to humans. So it's kind of another framework to use for people who are concerned that their career, their industry, their livelihood may go away. I just encourage everyone to ask the question. Maybe that's because there's a calling for
Right.
me that doesn't involve this thing, and maybe this is the time. This is the wake up call. Grab the brass ring, right? Like it's the way that the cosmos says,
Right. Right.
find your passion. You will end up making more money. And by the way, 12 million more jobs in the next 3 years will be created. They'll just be adjacent to the ones that are being lost.
So I'm going to push back a little more. So I know that I've heard this argument before that, there's certain things that humans are good at: empathy, social context, rationality. But I've also, I've seen like there was a famous Reddit study. I don't know if you've seen that where they compared, they what they did is they compared responses by a doctor that were auto-generated by generative AI versus a not doctor, and the idea was that the AI was able to create more empathetic emails because it could spend more time on each person. And there's seems like a lot of situations like that. I mean, I don't know. My doctor's always overworked. She doesn't necessarily have enough time to write detailed and doesn't know all the information. But, and I can see where a generative AI creating, even throwing in, how's the kids, things like that, might make it seem more empathetic, might make me, feel more connected with the doctor. So I guess I guess I'm struggling with, is it really empathy that makes humans special? And creativity is another area too, where again, I know, the writer's strike, Hollywood writer's strike, there was a lot of fear and concern among writers about, AI writing, crappy scripts for sitcoms and replacing them. And it right now it's not very good, but I mean, I've just been amazed about how quickly, especially in video, like in Kling generative AI has been advancing with Runway and Clean and Sora, and it's taking on more and more of sort of the creative aspects of creating a film. And I guess one question is, how will humans necessarily fit into that in the future if it's really we're discovering now that AI might be taking over some of the most creative aspects of our life, or situations where you require empathy. Just one more example. I interviewed a person who was very interested in using AI in education, and he was talking about the opportunities of having like personalized learning agents for specific students that know everything about the history. Again, humans would love to do that. It's just we can't scale up and we don't have the time to do it necessarily. So I'm wondering, there might be a future where, a lot of the empathy stuff is kind of like outsourced to the AI. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
So I talk a lot about the principles of responsible AI. And one of the ways that anyone who's using AI needs to commit to using it responsibly is, well, there are a couple principles, but one of the important ones is we never want AI to confuse a human into thinking the human's interacting with another human. And so I bristle when I hear about Piper, the AI SDR, sales development representative, or AI
Right.
as your therapist,
Right.
because anything that confuses the human, including even like the early versions of Google Duplex, which was designed to make reservations, a hair appointment, etc., on your behalf, and to confuse the person on the other line into thinking they were speaking with another human. So that is an example of practicing irresponsible AI. I'll give you an example of practicing responsible AI. So when it's obvious that it's an AI that you're engaged with, when it's clear what information, usually your personal information, is being used to make the decision, and what control you have over influencing the outcome of that decision if you disagree with the decision that the automation makes. That's how to practice responsible AI. And maybe I'll give a couple of examples of what I've seen
Please.
where I think kind of push on this notion of, do we want empathetic AI? And the Hollywood writer's strike, and kind of give a point and a counterpoint. So where I think AI is used responsibly is in an example like this. This is a PeopleRain customer, but I think that this is a fairly universal use case. A lot of the most senior engineers at this organization happens to be like the third biggest manufacturer of parts for car doors in the world.
Okay.
And a lot of the most senior engineers are in the process of retiring. And so they've got a lot of wicked smart kids from IIT and top schools that know everything there is to know about fluid mechanics and particle physics and the tensile properties of various
Right.
plastics, but they never designed a part for a car door.
Right.
And so what they're doing is using PeopleRain, a capability of the PeopleRain virtual agent called expert interviews, to actually digitize interactions with the experts. And through conversational AI, using kind of interactive multimodal experiences, every junior engineer now sits down with kind of a digital twin of the founders of the company and everybody who's most expert in designing door parts. So that's a task where before, like the car that you and I would get into, or my kid might get into, was less safe because parts were being designed by someone who didn't really know how to design door parts. And now that won't be the case anymore. So kind of to the point of a good opportunity for skilled humans to partner or have their skills augmented by AI, I think that's a good example. And I'll pause there before giving the counterpoint.
Yeah. No. So I understand. I think this is an example of like, what you're saying is that there's a difference between AI replacing sort of functionality that humans have right now and AI amplifying people's ability. I think this is a really interesting example of where you're intentionally kind of cloning that expertise so that you can provide an apprenticeship. You can provide that extra information for next generation. But you're saying that in this case, it's very, very important that people realize that they're interacting with an AI and understanding the limitations of that. And I'm sorry, yeah, I want to hear what the counterpoint was.
So, an example of where I think fear of automation of jobs has had unintended consequences. You mentioned the Hollywood writers' strike. I'm going to mention one that's more recent, and that's the dock workers' strike.
Yeah.
The conclusion was very positive for the dock workers, that union, except for in one respect. They got like an insane, like 65% pay raise. Like, Stephen, wouldn't it be awesome if tomorrow, like, your manager was like, hey, do you want a 65% pay raise?
Right.
Like, yeah, where do I sign up? Right. But it turns out the one place where they failed miserably in their negotiation was they wanted to control how much automation could be introduced at the ports.
Yeah.
And that was dismissed out of hand. And nobody asked me for my opinion, but if the lead negotiator had said, how should we approach this thorny topic of automation at the docks? I would have said the same thing that I would have said to, like, the poor souls building the pyramids in ancient Egypt. Like, do you want the lever and the pulley? Do you want the wheel? Like, yeah, we'll take it. Sounds good. Right. And the dock workers were basically, being asked, do you want technology that will augment you in ways that might extend the number of years you can work?
Yeah.
It might help you lift heavier objects. It might help you get that object to the top of the stack of boxes faster or better. Let's just think about what's being introduced, and just maybe, thought experiment, maybe that automation is designed to do things that humans weren't designed to do. So rather than running away from AI, maybe we should think about reasons to run to it and envision a world of work that's safer, potentially, more productivity in fewer hours. You have more time with family, pursue a hobby. You probably even make more money. That's the world of humans collaborating with AI. And I feel like that's lost in a lot of these kind of, hyperbolic scenarios.
Well, let me ask, I know that PeopleRain disables like LLMs by default. And can you give me some context? Because I think it's relevant to the conversation we're having, why you made that decision.
In the world of work, what you want is not generative AI. What you want is what we call prescriptive AI. So as an employee, if I say need my laptop fixed, I don't want an essay about how laptops are fixed. I don't want a haiku about Lenovo's versus Dell's. I just want my laptop fixed. And so I just want the answer, and I want the action taken. That's one role for AI. Generative AI, which large language models, foundation models are really exceptional at, is creative tasks, brainstorming, drafting documents, reviewing documents. There's a certain need for that in a marketing context at work, or for the review of emails, or strategy discussions. But when you're talking about employee service and giving employees back the time they need to do more work they love, that's where you want to turn off what I call the Roach Motel of AI, which is these large foundation models, kind of big bags of words that are really good at creative output. And you want to just focus on delivering the right answer the first time, every time.
Got it. I see. So they're not sort of purpose built, or they don't fit exactly what someone needs in that situation. And in fact, they can stray off to, not necessarily useful stuff.
The outcomes can be misleading or at worst dangerous.
Or hallucinate. They can hallucinate an answer.
I don't want an LLM enrolling me in the wrong benefits, or inputting the wrong information, or suggesting a policy that it hallucinates that doesn't really exist, or inventing how much that thing costs. And I, all of a sudden my kids aren't covered for medical insurance. Those are the risks of letting AI be creative when you're in a work domain.
Oh, I've completely sympathetic to that. I actually I thought I'd get super clever when I was picking out my new insurance policy the last time we had open enrollment. And so I uploaded all the different insurance policies to ChatGPT. I had it generate a table. I told the criteria I wanted it to compare it on. It popped up with the answer. It says, you should use this insurance policy. I said, great. I just saved myself, hours of work. And then I looked at the table and I discovered very quickly I had made up, most of the numbers in the different cells. I was like, damn it. I was about to follow your advice. Why am I listening to you? But
In a
yeah,
world where that fictitious policy exists,
it would have
you
been
should pick
great.
it.
It would have been awesome. Yeah. Um, well, so I guess one of my concerns about work, I hate to keep coming back to this issue, but we're seeing AIs get smarter and smarter. And, there seems to be a lot of headroom, especially with generative AI, with open AI, for, more and more intelligent, agents working for us. I know that the chain of thought stuff. I know I watched, they had a podcast on Sequoia Capital not too long ago when they were talking about how much more room there is to add inference to it. And so we pretty sure we're not at the end of this journey yet. And so, as we get into things that look more and more creative, I hate to come back to this topic, but it does feel like there will be a certain point where we're going to have to say, look, this AI is going to be better at this job than any human could be. Obviously for researching jobs, maybe for things like paralegal jobs, for a lot of different jobs that were, again, going back to the Microsoft and Salesforce agents. I mean, they're trying to actively replace, certain roles, marketing roles, people who, front end sort of like support personnel roles. We talked about Devon replacing engineering roles. So we're not there quite yet, but it is imaginable. And we're getting pretty close now that we're getting up to sort of PhD level knowledge on these things. So I guess I'm just wondering, at that point, because I know you have this vision of AI augmenting humans, but I still have this fear around, longer term. It seems like there's all sorts of roles that, even creative roles where AI can end up replacing humans. And I was curious what you thought about that.
It's a very important topic.
Yeah.
So if we roll back the clock, not that long, but to when Jeff Hinton, who's now a Nobel Prize winner,
Yep.
invented backpropagation, and it led to the commercialization of neural nets and everything that we now know about LLMs. He is brilliant, and I believe made the mistake of comparing the architecture that he developed, premised on concept of backpropagation and training these models, but he call it anthropomorphized the technology by referring to it as a neural net. And we all came to believe that the objective of artificial intelligence was to replicate the human brain with software. And I don't believe that that's actually the purpose of artificial intelligence. A few years after that happened, OpenAI launched with the mission of accelerating the path to AGI, artificial general intelligence.
Yep.
I believe that did a disservice to humanity. A few years after that, a gentleman at Google named Brent Lemoine famously came out and said this was the Google Palm model, and call it an earlier version of like a Gemini.
Yep.
Said it is sentient.
Yeah.
We have been on this steady path toward building or instilling fear in us that superhuman AI is about to take the form of humanoid robots, and we're right on the cusp of dystopian science fiction.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's the case. I think if instead we shifted the paradigm, kind of the framework, the mental model that we use, to thinking about AI more like the hand loom weavers thought about a steam powered loom, or
Right.
how the horse and buggy drivers thought about the gas engine.
Right.
That's a better way to think about the partnership that's going to change the world. Because an LLM or an AI-based framework or system might credibly do great on the MCAT, as it has shown to do, or the LSAT, standardized tests. That should not lead us to say that it has achieved superhuman intelligence or even that it's sentient. So I know that's a nuanced version of probably the answer you were hoping for, but I think it's an important one for us to have, is that mental model about the partnership between humans and machines. And we should be comfortable challenging this notion that machines are on the cusp of overtaking humans in some or all human pursuits.
Interesting. So it's not, so you think it's just sort of fundamentally wrong to think, going back to Jeffrey Hinton and the original back propagation algorithms and modeling it on neural networks, that it's not, we're not reproducing human intelligence here. We are continuing to create better tools, but all we're doing with these tools are, as they're incremental, sort of like, really important, but they're incremental advances, rather than, we're not going to be introducing an alien baby on the earth anytime soon, or something that's equivalent to human level intelligence. I mean,
The
one
brain
thing,
is one of the most
yeah.
efficient. Sorry,
No, go ahead,
maybe
please.
I'll just build on that point. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
The brain is one of the most efficient machines. To say it's an understatement to say it is the most sophisticated machine in humanity. It runs on about less than 30 watts of power. If you compare that to what a cluster of NVIDIA machines,
Right.
That cluster, how expensive it is, how power hungry it is. Each ChatGPT query consumes the equivalent of 3 bottles of drinking water.
I know. I feel ashamed whenever I ask it to do a knock knock joke.
Right, exactly.
How many animals did I kill with that knock knock joke? So that's not very funny anymore.
Right, exactly. Yeah, haikus about cats.
Right.
But I mean, one of the things that I think is underappreciated is that the kind of computational power of an LLM today, if we were to use it in kind of living species today, it's maybe the power of like a gnat or an ant.
Right.
And so there's a pretty big gap before we talk about, the kind of efficiency and processing capabilities of any kind of, AI-based machines coming, anywhere near what the human brain can do. So I think it's important context.
Yeah, and I think so. I did an interview with a professor of philosophy at Cambridge, Marta Helena, and it was interesting because she was comparing artificial intelligence not only to human intelligence but also to animal intelligence, and she had some standard sort of like ways that they use to measure animal intelligence, and she was applying it to AI systems, which I thought was interesting. And her basic point, which I think is a little different from what you're saying, but because she was saying that, number one, AI is still not close to animal level sort of general intelligence. It's just not there. But on the other hand, she also was very open to saying, well, AI is already showing glimmers of consciousness. And so, and also I interviewed Lenore and Manuel Blum recently. And Manuel Blum, he created the CAPTCHA, but he also won the Turing award, which is kind of like the Nobel Prize in computer science. And he's also talking about, no, I believe AI right now already showing glimmers of consciousness. So it seems like there's very different, sort of positions, and I'm still struggling to understand, because I understand what you're saying, that, it seems like there's two camps, right? There's people who just say, oh, large language models are just doing autocomplete. And so it's just, statistics and boring. On the other hand, we have people who are saying, oh, these emergent capabilities are coming out of, this autocomplete now. And in some ways, humans are just doing autocomplete. But now, that whenever you have a system which reaches a certain level of, once we get to billions or trillions of these parameters, intelligence just kind of emerges and consciousness just kind of emerges. And that's what we want to call it. And so it feels like we have two very different camps and thinking about it. And, some of it, there's, practical issues, right? I mean, general intelligence would be useful, which we're not at yet. So, that's something that will either happen or it won't. But then there's also the whole issue of like consciousness. And at what point do we have to like start thinking of our AI agents in the same way as we think about, cats and dogs and horses and, potentially, other things. And that gets us into some really weird ethical territory where now we're spinning up, conscious agents, and we have to worry about what we're doing here. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really even know how to go about like trying to reconcile those two different views of the future.
I think an important direction that these kinds of conversations need to go in is asking the really important question: what is consciousness?
Yeah,
And if that's the aim of an organization like OpenAI, I'm just not comfortable with
yeah,
a shared definition of what that is. And if we don't have a shared definition, we'll never know if we achieve it.
yeah,
And the whole notion of, replacing most human behaviors with AI, which is kind of the conventional definition of AGI, I'm not comfortable with that until again, I mean, introduce your own definition of consciousness, but
yeah,
until I believe an artificial intelligence can model in code or in language what it means to feel pain
yeah,
or joy. To me, there's no algorithm that could approximate what those human human unique emotions mean. And
yeah,
so to me, that's why just the analogy of, I feel much better talking about humans and machines and a partnership between kind of carbon based and silicon based life forms, but not the
yeah.
convergence.
Right. That's fair. And I know, we have, thousands of years of philosophers debating about the notion of consciousness. There's, contemporary philosophers like Daniel Dennett, who died recently, who denied that there was a such thing as consciousness. He compared it to like, vital forces or life forces or things like that, where we just discovered now that we don't actually have to have that to be able to explain what life is. There doesn't have to be a special life force. And then we have, like David Chalmers, the philosopher who talks about the hard problem of consciousness. And, we can, the stuff that you're pointing to, the experiential part of it, feeling pain. Will a, computer ever feel pain? And we have other people who just deny that that sense of consciousness even exists. I do want to say, for some odd reason, I spent a couple hours yesterday reading through the systems card for the latest version, the O1 version of OpenAI, and I was a little shocked when I went down. I don't know if you've read it or not, where the section on Apollo research and the meter research, where they were talking about deception and self-awareness, and how O1 there has a very high level of self-awareness, which I know psychologists like to define consciousness in terms of self-awareness. So it's a little weird. They were worried about scenarios where O1 would deceive its human trainers and secretly do stuff behind the scenes. And we are getting into, very scary, science fiction territory here, where they're trying to monitor these things, as they should. I mean, these are like safety issues that they're looking at around the alignment problem. But, now that we're starting to be a little more concerned about these things actually trying to deceive their humans and things like that, it does sort of move us closer to territory where I worry, are we really talking about glimmers of consciousness now?
Um, like Jan LeCun, who's at Meta, I think the lead on the Meta AI team, I believe that if humans are genius enough to produce AI, I think we're genius enough to know when to turn it off. And I do believe that's possible, that
Yeah,
AIs will develop ways to mislead humans,
yeah,
because they have certain reward functions
yeah,
that they get credit for
right,
doing things. Like there's the kind of the famous example of you ask an AI to cure cancer,
yeah,
and what the AI will do is eradicate all humans. There will be no cancer left.
right.
And so, I mean, exercising AI
Nice
responsibly.
engineering solution. Yeah,
Exactly, right?
I appreciate it.
Logical. But we also control those reward functions.
Right.
So, I believe that there are enough of us out there that believe in exercising AI responsibly and appreciate the ethical dilemmas that increased use of AI creates for us. And I'm thankful. I'm an AI optimist. I'm on Team
Yeah.
Human. There are a lot of people who are going to rise up to create those careers, fill those,
Yeah.
to the point about jobs, all those new jobs that need to monitor and regulate and train and learn from these emergent capabilities of AIs. Like, I think that's an opportunity to unlock human ingenuity. And to me, that cuts to the core of what I'm calling this new and unique partnership between humans and machines.
Yeah, I love that vision. I guess one question is, do you think, I mean, let's say, there will be a ton of jobs that we just lose because of AI. And I know like Sam Altman has been looking into like, universal basic incomes and all this stuff. It's kind of weird. But anyway, but he's been looking into, do you think that, I mean, that for a certain, group of the population, segment of the population, will just say, look, I'm happy just having all this time brought back to me. I don't necessarily want to do. I don't want to become an AI researcher or any of the jobs that are being created right now. Is that necessarily bad for society? I mean, do you think that there's a future where we unlock, I don't know, where humans start focusing on other areas of their life other than work, or do you think work is one of those things that's just essential to being a
I love that
happy,
you brought that
thriving
up.
human?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it will look like UBI, like universal basic income. In fact, a lot of the early experiments with UBI have failed because it tends to demotivate people when they're
Yeah,
given a handout. But I firmly believe that we should plan for a future in which a week's worth of work gets done in 2 or 3 days. And I
yeah,
think there are and will be into the future sufficient hard problems that impact humanity that, if every human had another 60% of their time
yeah,
to, engage in public service or, public works projects or, you know, um, team up to eradicate famine,
yeah,
address global warming, things
yeah,
that there probably aren't enough people
yeah,
focused on solving these kinds of big global issues. Like, oh my gosh, I love thinking about a world where your work
yeah,
is partly a structured job that you get paid to do in the traditional sense, but call it, work with a little w versus work with the big W.
right,
Your
right.
real work is the thing that you're doing to contribute in some truly meaningful way back to society. That's so much more fulfilling, and it's bigger than just writing a check to someone for doing nothing.
Yeah. So I like that. So we're probably not looking at a future where a lot of people are happy sitting around playing video games all day, but what we're hoping to do is unlock a future where people can engage in meaningful things like helping their fellow humans. Um, yeah, I mean, with that thought, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been super interesting. Where can people go to be able to follow your podcast? What's the best place to find out?
Go to wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple
Yeah.
Podcasts, etc. AI in the Future of Work is the
Yep.
podcast. I think my name will probably appear when you publish this, Dan Turchin,
Yep.
as the host. It's also available. All of the episodes, including transcriptions, I believe, are available on the People Reign website, which is People Reign, like the reign of a king or queen, REIGN.io. And I think there's a tab in the nav that says podcast. You can listen to them there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today.
Absolute pleasure, Stephen. I've enjoyed hanging out.
Thank you for joining us for the OpenAI Changes Everything podcast, where we explore how OpenAI is transforming the future of humanity. Please remember to subscribe to ensure that you receive future episodes.